I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and tonight we are going to mix 3 secondary colors using my favorite Triad color mixing technique to see what we end up with. Specifically, I am curious to see if we will be mixing browns and what kinds of browns we will get. Now, I have done something like this before using neon fluorescent secondary colors, and we got a lot of very lovely neutrals when we did that. But I have not done this with more classic secondaries, our green, purple, and orange. There are 2 different ways that I could go about this project. I could start with pre-mixed secondaries that I have no idea if they're all combinations of colors and pigments or what, or I could mix my own secondaries based on some Triad color mixing I've done with Dharma acid dyes in the past, and then use those custom colors that I mix myself to do the secondaries. And I think I'm gonna go with the first one today and use the pre-mixed orange, purple, and green. But later on, as I go into trying to mix my own brown from primary colors, then I think we might try this again where I mix the 3 starting colors myself. But that's for another day. I still need to go and pick out the orange, green, and purple that I will be using today, but the plan for the dyeing is similar to a lot of these other Triad exercises I've done before, where at each point there will be the most concentrated version of one color unmixed, and then we'll be adding less and less of the orange or the green or the purple as we sort of go down the triangle, giving us 3 colors that are a blend of all 3 in the center, but we'll be looking at the gradient of each of these 2 colors along each of the sides. We're gonna dye 20-gram miniskeins today, and I'll show you those in a moment. And my plan is to go for a 0.5% depth of shade total for each color. I'm going lighter than a 1% depth of shade because, if memory serves me correctly, the green I'm gonna use can be a little temperamental, and so I thought that we would just go a little bit lighter in terms of intensity. But a 0.5% depth of shade is half of a gram of dye per 100 grams of yarn, and so we're gonna need for each sample 0.1 grams of dye. And as I go and pick our colors and make 1% stock solutions of each of these colors, this means we're gonna need a total of 10 milliliters of the 1% stock solution to hit this target. And so therefore, you can understand the ratios that I set up over there. If I was dyeing 10-gram miniskeins with the setup, we would end up with our 1% depth of shade. Or if I wanted a 1% depth of shade on the 20-gram minis, I would just need to multiply all of these numbers by 2. I have pre-soaked 15 20-gram miniskeins of Wool to Die For's Platinum DK. This yarn is 75% superwash merino wool, 25% nylon. There's no acid in here yet. We'll add acid after we've mixed the yarn together with all of the dyes. But I would like to take this opportunity to give a huge shout out and thank you to all of the ChemKnits Fiber patrons, including Jessica Parco, Tamara Svanes, Don Jans, Karen Siegel, and the rest of the Fiber patrons whose names you see on the screen right now. I'll talk a little bit more about Patreon at the end of the video, but if you want to learn more, go and check out patreon.com/ChemKnits to learn how you can get some really fun perks. And here are the colors we're going to use today. We're going to use Dharma acid dyes in Blazing Orange, Royal Purple, and Emerald Green. I think that these are the 3 colors that I used in Hanukkah 2021 when I combined a whole rainbow of colors with black to look at a lot of different combinations. At least I think they're the colors I used then. I put on my deluxe rubber respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves so we could measure out these dyes to make 1% stock solutions. For the course of our triangle, we are going to use about 50 milliliters of a 1% stock solution of each of the 3 colors. And so if I measure out 1 gram of dye and dissolve that in 100 milliliters of total volume, that will be enough so that way we have plenty of dye should I need to redo one of the samples or something like that. But once everything was well dissolved and the volumes were at 100 milliliters and I was satisfied, now we can go and start setting up the Triad and blending these colors together. I set out 15 cups with 1 cup of cool tap water in each one to have as our starting point. And then using graduated syringes, I started adding the dye to each of the cups, adding between 2.5 and 10 milliliters of each of the colors, doing 1 color at a time according to that scheme I showed you at the very beginning. The end goal is to have a total of 10 milliliters of dye in each cup. It's just the proportions are going to be different in every single one. Once I finished adding the dye, I took a spoon that I wiped off in between each color and stirred to mix up the colors. I am so curious to see what's going to happen when we add the yarn. The colors are pretty deep right now, so it's hard to say for sure, but I see some lovely like reddish pinks in here and some really beautiful, more dirty greens. The orange, poor orange, just like yellow, it definitely is not very dominant here. A lot of times we'll see like one little triangle because maybe one color will be really dominant, but I think it's just like everyone but that orange is like, oh, we're bright, we're saturated. And ignore the numbers that are on the sides of the containers because those really are just leftover. I will label the lids for this project. Okay, but we've got our orange, our purple, and our green. I think that can potentially, if and when I redo this, which I suppose if I redo this, I will be using orange, green, and purple that I mix myself versus using pre-mixed colors. But maybe if I was going to do this again, I would double the amount of orange relative to everything else, but I'd have to think about what that would mean for like the ratios, because that would change the total amount of dye and make that different across a triangle. It could be done as a color exercise. It's just, I'll have to think about it. Think about how I'd work that out. Okay, the next colors I desperately want to see are these midpoints. Ooh! Whoa, we've got like a burgundy here. I don't know if I would have predicted that. That is cool. You know, I guess it's almost like the blue and yellow are canceling each other out a little bit there, and we're getting something just really red focused. Oh wow. What is this color? I am so curious to see what this ends up at. This is very, very gray, very neutral. Whoa. I don't want to go as far to say that it's black, but I did not expect that. The only one that like of these midpoints that for sure is leaning towards one color is this green right here. Is way more green than orange. It does not feel like a huge transformation of that color in the way that I feel with these others. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Okay, I am so intrigued. I mean, we definitely are having things that are more muddy here. There's no question, but these are gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. And so it goes to show that everything is all about proportion. When you mix two colors that you don't think you should mix, you're not necessarily gonna end up with brown. We may have some brown in the center, but this is a lot more variety of color that I'm seeing than when I did this with the neon colors. With the neons, I think we ended up with a lot of very orange and yellow kind of leaning colors. But that's also because in those neon fluorescent secondary colors, the green and the orange are both very yellow leaning, and the purple there is very, very pink leaning. And so there's not very much blue represented in there at all. And so I think that's why we saw a lot of tones in this range when we did that. And here we're seeing, whew, these berry colors are beautiful. The reason why doing an exercise like this is really helpful is that even if you have a huge collection of pre-mixed colors, maybe you have a huge collection of pre-mixed colors, but maybe you also don't have a huge collection of pre-mixed colors. and you prefer to mix your own. And so sometimes it can be hard to get a recipe for a beautiful rusty brick red. And so playing around with the dyes that you have that are pre-mixed tones versus being primaries can sometimes help for you to understand how they are relative to each other intensity-wise, so that way you know, okay, I want to make like a really dirty, sort of alligatory, crocodile greenish color. Okay, we're gonna add some orange to the bright green. I mean, that might not be what you would expect, but it's helpful to see because I think that this is awesome. I guess like, maybe if I wanted to try to hit a berry color, I would have added red to the purple, but adding orange also just makes it less bright. Okay, so far the most brown is a lot of orange with a little bit of purple, but I would say that orange is fairly brown leaning already. So as we go into the center, we have the first one that was 2 parts orange, this one is 2 parts purple, and this one is 2 parts green. And I'm curious to see how we look. The 2 parts orange is definitely muddy. Feels like a very almost grayish brown. It doesn't feel that warm to me. Here we've got a very lovely muted, much more of a dustier purple there. And then this is also just more muted in general because of the way that these colors are balancing one another. But there is so much color in here. Oh, I don't know if it's showing up on camera well. Oh, it might be. It's hard to say because I have the camera up so high to see the whole triangle. But this is way more of a rainbow than what I anticipated. Okay, to be fair, we've got a lot of green leaning colors and a lot of like pinky purple leaning colors. But it's still gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous, and I am so glad that I did this. Oh my goodness. Now I need to add acid to these containers, and so I went ahead and added 2 teaspoons of white vinegar to each of these containers. I know that emerald green sometimes needs a bit more acid and time, and if we need to, we can steam set the yarn directly in these containers, but we're going to try to cold process this for a day or so, and then we'll check in tomorrow to see where the colors are to know if we need to just apply heat right away or if we can remove the yarn and steam set it directly. I really enjoy cold process because it makes it easier to deal with 15 or even 30 or more different colors at once, whereas if I was kettle dyeing each one of these individually, maybe in mason jars I could do about 5 at a time, or I'm limited to the number of pots I have, and so it would just take a lot longer. This is a faster way to process the color. The other thing I want to point out right now is look at how dark a lot of this yarn feels. Sure, we've got some colors that are going to be a little bit more medium toned, but the total depth of shade for whether we're dealing with this orange or that purple is a 0.5% depth of shade, so the equivalent of half a gram of dye per 100 grams of yarn. And don't forget that those numbers talk about the amount of dye. It's a way to compare one color relative to itself if you want it more pastel, if you want it deeper. But you know, things can have the same depth of shade and one can look way more saturated than the other just because it's a different recipe, a different mix of pigments. And now I am going to add lids on. But since it's the middle of winter, I am not gonna take things outside. Oh, no, 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 no. I am going to place all of these samples into a 5-gallon bucket. And I usually put it on top of like a paper shopping bag just in case there's any leak or drip. But set with this secondary container, we should be totally fine. And I'm gonna leave it there to just let the colors slowly absorb. Now I didn't stir them after adding acid, but they will get stirred up a little bit as we move them into that 5-gallon container to just sit. Oh my goodness, but I am so excited to see how these turn out. So anyway, I will check back in with you tomorrow. It has been about 24 hours and I do see a little bit of dye on the lids, but that's because that wasn't in contact with the yarn. And I think checking them to the side. There might be a hint of color in some of them, but let's go ahead and heat set everything. Here are the colors, and while there is a window behind me over here, it does, because of the way that the depth of color here, look like that we're in more shadow over here, which we really are not. It's just that those purples feel darker, so it feels almost like that there's a spotlight over there, just because that green is really, really bright, and the royal purple is a little bit darker. Now, I would say the biggest surprise from all of this right now would be this colorway right here. It almost looked like it was black when we mixed it up yesterday, but the color is almost like this. I guess there's elements of slate blue, almost elements of more teal. It is absolutely broken, and something about it, I don't think it's quite green enough, but it is a bit reminiscent of the colorway that I was created from night 1 of the 22 ChemKnits Hanukkah special, where I mixed yellow, I think it was 2 parts blue, 1 part yellow, 1 part pink. And so that kind of color is similar to this kind of mixture that we've done here, because by mixing these 3 secondary colors, we are in every single sample, I guess except for the 3 on the ends, mixing all 3 primary colors. As I get ready to remove all of the yarn, I figured that we would check in with each of our, I guess they're our primaries for the day, our secondaries. Does that make everything else a tertiary color? Right, there's a hint of some pink here with the purple, but for this purple, that's really not bad. Let's see how the green did. The orange, actually on camera it looks like there's a little bit of yellow there. There's a hint of some green in here. Not very much color, but there's a hint. And so I'm gonna go ahead and steam it. But I think what I want to make sure is that I don't necessarily want a bunch of things to touch each other to end up with color transfer. So I think I'm gonna be a little careful as we go ahead and put things in the steamer basket. I decided that the orange should sort of be by itself. It's most likely to pick up color from some of the others, and almost everything else with the amount of green and purple in there, we shouldn't see tons of transfer. It wouldn't be super obvious if there is transfer. So I grouped the other yarn in groups of 3 or 4, added on a nylon zip tie, and then layered it into a steamer basket to steam set everything for 30 minutes. I removed the one orange container, but I think it's funny that you can kind of see the combination of colors in this very pastel form right now, and it looks so pretty. But again, it's not very much dye that's left. The reason why I removed the orange container is just so that way I could have the orange in here, making sure the side with the Sharpie is off to the side. But all other 14 skeins are sort of layered in here with the purple ones over here, the green ones over here, and then the combinations that have both purple and green in the middle. And we're gonna heat set this for at least 30 minutes. The 30 minutes are up, and I'm gonna go ahead and turn off the heat, but I'm gonna leave the yarn in here for a while to cool off, just because it'll give it a little extra heat, which is not going to hurt anything. But once the yarn is cool, I may remove it from here in like 20 minutes or so. Once the yarn is cool, then we can go ahead and wash it. Let's wash our yarn and cross our fingers for not a lot of bleeding. I definitely did not pick colors that would make my life easier. And as for our orange, and who do I want to attach you to? Now I'm going to attach you here with this purple that's going to the orange. That seems like a place where you belong. All right, and now, oh, the water is so cold. Oh, I know winter in Massachusetts is not as cold as other places, but the tap water can be very cold. All right, so right now, I'm not seeing any hints of color bleeding, which is a great place to start. Don't forget, the reason why we went for a 0.5% depth of shade across the board is to hopefully minimize bleeding when dealing with this many samples. You certainly could take one of these recipes and bring it up to a 1% depth of shade, and I don't think that necessarily would be a bleeder or be a big problem, but given that this is one of the last videos I'm filming in 2022, I wanted the washing to be easy. I wanted to give myself, hopefully, something that would be nice and successful. Oh, thank goodness. All right, I'm not seeing color come out. I'm gonna call this a win. I am gonna finish rinsing out the soap. Then I'll put the yarn through my spin dryer, hang it up to dry, and we'll take a look at the finished yarn. But right now, this gives me real Halloween vibes. Here is all of the dry yarn, and don't worry, I'm gonna organize this a little bit better, but it's definitely giving off witchy vibes versus brown vibes, and that's pretty cool. Here are the three colors we were working with today. We've got blazing orange, emerald green, and royal purple. And I would say right here, the three colors feel really balanced. They all feel fairly bright. I suppose maybe the royal purple feels a hair darker than the others, but they don't feel like one is really out of sync. When we start to bring in the one-to-one mixtures of each of these colors, it's clear that the bottom of the triangle is really dominating things. The green, this middle is, I mean, you know, it's not as bad as I originally thought because there is a change of color from the green to the middle and from the purple to the middle. It doesn't feel like as far as maybe it did. Of course, when we pull out the rest of the triangle, I think the orange is still an outlier. But of these colors, I adore this very neutral grayish blue that we got here from combining the purple and the green. I don't think I've ever thought to mix those two colors together, and I'm so glad that we did. If we're looking at how each of these colors blend together, the orange is a little bit of a standout because you could see a fade set that goes through the green, goes through the purple, all the way back there. There feels almost like a continuous gradient there. It's just, I think that what we need, instead of the 3 parts orange, 1 part either green or purple, we need like a 9 parts orange, 1 part green or purple, or even 19 parts orange, 1 part green or purple, to really start blending that orange into the rest of the colors more. But unlike other triads that we've done, I do feel like the green and purple are pretty well balanced, both in respect to the orange, but also with respect to each other. And what I mean is that I feel like the center really is a midpoint between the colors versus being a combination, but maybe not the halfway point if you were gonna make a fade set. And last, but certainly not least, we have these 3 colors in the center. And I would say of everything that we've dyed today, this color feels the most brown, but it's not really very brown yet. I mean, it definitely feels greenish and pinkish, which is weird. But I would say of everything, the closest to brown was having the 2 parts orange, 1 part purple, 1 part green. Yeah, maybe here on camera that's looking a little bit brown, a very warm brown. But it's approaching it. I think that if we had it more saturated, maybe that would help. And I don't know if we need to increase the orange a little bit to make it even muddier. What do you think? What do you think about how we could adjust these recipes to try to get a true brown color? I love the way these colors turned out so much that I think it's going to be worth me doing this again, but mixing my green, purple, and orange from deep magenta, Caribbean blue, and brilliant yellow. Because then as we get into these colors, I can calculate, based on the proportions I use at the corners, the recipes I would need for the colors in the center, and there's something very fun about that. And hopefully that would bring me closer to mixing a brown using those primaries. It's also possible it's time to pull in some black to help get the brown, because maybe we won't get the depth we need with these brighter colors, but I don't know. I know some of you know a lot more about color theory than I do, but I'm intrigued and excited. And so if you would like to see these projects, please subscribe, turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. This is by far the biggest thing that you can do to help support the content here. Looking at all these skeins twisted up, there are a few things I'd like to point out. One, this does start to feel more like a very, very warm, almost like bricky brown color. And all of a sudden this one from the center is feeling more brown to me, looking at it this way with all the other colors. The other thing that I think is really fun to see is that yes, the orange is a standout, but our other bright colors do also stand out a little bit from the rest of these colors. And if you remove these, like all these colors together is really, really pretty. You could arrange this in a lot of different fun ways. So yeah, I think that because our true secondary colors aren't muddy at all, that is one reason why we see a little bit of a difference. Now, at the time of filming this video, I have not yet divided these into maybe 3 sets of 5, or maybe it'll be a set of 3 and 2 sets of 6. I haven't done that yet. I will probably do that later on, but I want to make sure to get this Dyepot PS video out before the end of the year, before the end of 2022 for the ChemKnits patrons. And I did say I would talk a little bit more about Patreon. The ChemKnits Patreon is a really fun place. Every month, all patrons get a newsletter with the newest episode of Dyepot PS a month early, and they vote in a poll for the next theme and the next video, which is so much fun. I really enjoy handing that control over to the ChemKnits patrons. Depending on the level, there are some other really fun perks, like behind the scenes live streams where I'm filming an episode of Dyepot Weekly. That is exclusive Patreon content, and you can even get advance notice of ChemKnits Creations shop restocks, and at some levels there are even permanent coupons and shout outs. And so the whole thing is so much fun. You really should go check it out. But if you don't want to sign up for the Patreon, you can still follow ChemKnits over there and then get a notification whenever I release a public post. So that is still an option that is completely free. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and whether you are watching this with early access in December 2022, or it's one of the first videos that you're seeing of mine in January 2023, I hope that you have a wonderful, happy new year. And thank you so much for watching.